Hi, and welcome to the It's a Good Start podcast with your hosts Mike Lander and Kevin Givens. The aim of our show is to help scale-up entrepreneurs master the best of what other people have already figured out so that you can unlock your own potential. We started it because we've both been entrepreneurs for over 25 years and wanted to share our knowledge and our guest knowledge. We're all about actionable insights. We want you to take away one or two things per episode that can help you move the ball forward in your business. We really hope you enjoy and keep coming back for more.
Hi Rand, thanks very much for joining us today. So I think having you on the podcast is great because what we want to do is we want to share entrepreneurial journeys and we want to share kind of like the real side to entrepreneurship. We know it's a roller coaster. We know there's times that are amazing and very high highs. We know there's very low lows that go with it. And I think just having followed you for a long time in the past, being involved in the SEO industry for the last 15, 20 years or so, obviously you've always been very transparent. I think it's one of your values kind of back in the MOZ days, and I'm sure that stems from you personally, and just your approach is very, very much, it's not braggy. It's not look at me, I'm amazing. It's very much the real side of this is what I'm sharing. Like I say, the lows as much as the highs, and I think that's very genuine. And I think kind of looking at your story, I definitely want to get on to kind of SparkToro and what you're doing now. But I think it'd be good to start kind of in the earlier days, like when you got started, because I remember SEO MOZ. Back from, I started SEO in 2003, and I think it really took off for me in that kind of 2005 sort of area. And honestly, back in those days, I read every blog post you wrote. I remember it was like gold of like, this is the stuff you need to follow. It was probably before I started attending events, so it's kind of that type of thing of, okay, I'm learning. I was blogging myself, but it felt like the real early days of forums and everyone just sharing ideas very openly. And I think even today, I now run an SEO agency that I think a lot of it has been inspired by the days of when you ran an agency at MOZ. We have kind of almost constrained ourselves in I'd say a positive way of, we have 12 clients that we work with typically on average. They're medium to large size. We have an experienced team of consultants behind it, and we try and do excellent work. And I think for me, like just maybe hearing a bit about how you got started. I know kind of some of the history myself about kind of the web development backgrounds and it being kind of your mum's company originally that you started to help out with. But it'd be great to hear in your words kind of how you got started and what that was like. Yeah. And when was that?
So you've got the time frame exactly right. 2003 is when I started the SEO MOZ blog.
Right.
But yeah, I think where our journeys diverge, Kevin, is that it sounds like you are doing very high quality work for your clients. And I was never good at running an agency. Not to say that the work necessarily wasn't good, but I struggled with, how do I remove sort of myself as the only person that any of our clients wanted to talk to and engage with. That was that sort of personal brand agency was a big challenge for me. As I was mentioning to Mike before we started recording, I was never good at the sales side. I did not enjoy that process. I could never find a way to be both genuine and authentic and sell. It just isn't.
It's hard. Yeah,
those very two difficult things always seemed in conflict to me, and I think this is one of the reasons why when we accidentally stumbled on our software model, which was 2007, we sort of put up a PayPal paywall to access some tools that we had built for our own agency. That business took off like a rocket ship, right? There just was not a lot of tools or software out there that could be used on the web with a low subscription price point that did a lot of the things that SEO agencies needed, and consultants and in-house folks too. And so, over the next, what was that? I think we basically launched in 2007, and then I stepped down as CEO in 2014. So, 7-8 years. went from 0 to $30 million in revenue, and millions of visitors to the website, and a team of, I think we had 6 or 7 people on the team when we started the software product. And by the end of 2014, we were probably at 180.
Wow. So Rand, I'm always fascinated by, you make it sound so easy. It's like, we had some of these software tools and a bit of PayPal, and then all of a sudden sales took off. Customer acquisition, just even though you weren't the sales lead, how did people know about you? So awareness. Yeah. And then how did you acquire customers? How did that work?
Yeah, Mike, let me be clear. I was the sales lead. We just had no sales.
Okay.
There was so SparkToro and MOZ are quite similar in this way. Actually, I think at some point my successor at MOZ tried to set up a sales team, and she sort of wanted to build up that muscle. Anyway, my understanding is it failed. I was not very involved at that point, but the only way to buy MOZ or SparkToro was you go to the website and you put in your credit card and you buy it. I mean, you could email and say like, hey, could I get a demo or this kind of thing? And someone at MOZ, usually me, might say, sure. But it was actually very uncommon. It was such early days of SaaS software, especially self-service SaaS software, that venture capitalists didn't even believe the model could work.
Right.
They were like, no, enterprise sales, that's the only way to sell software. What are you doing with this? People can put in their credit card online. I don't understand that. That doesn't make any sense. No one's going to do that. And we were like Netflix. And they're like, I don't know. Is that going to work?
Yeah, because the price point was what? Was it kind of $49, $99?
Let's see. MOZ started at $29 a month.
All right.
I think was the initial price point in 2007, and then it went up to like $39, $49. Eventually, I think the low price point, maybe by 2011 or so, 12, was $99 a month. But yeah, I mean, funny story, right? Like SparkToro, we started back down. It's $50 is the low price point. The odd thing about both those companies, again, is that the discovery model, right? How did people find us? And how did they decide to become customers?
Yep.
Was quite similar with one big difference. So at MOZ, basically, I'd been blogging 5 nights a week for 4 years in 2007 when the software launched, and there were, I want to say, between 15 and 20,000 subscribers, email subscribers to that blog, right? Many folks like yourself. And those people turned out to be our customers, right? It was not intentional. Like I did not build a blog or an email newsletter with the intention of eventually selling to those folks. I hope that some of them would become consulting customers, or they'd recommend someone to us for consulting, and that did start to happen. But the reality was that because we had been helping to teach people SEO all along, and then we built this product that essentially used the same insights that we thought you should do SEO with, in a, hey, this will save you a bunch of time and money and you can get better results from it. We built that for us in the same way that I was always writing about SEO. So of course, the people who like the content also like the product.
So these are true fans, Rand. So in the kind of Pat Flynn superfan kind of model, these were people that had followed you, understood you, bought into you, got the content, were learning from you. They weren't just people that had randomly hit subscribe. They were genuinely interested.
I'm not familiar with Pat Flynn, but you have to tell me what's the.
So Pat Flynn's a guy I followed for years in the States. He's a guy that built a company called SPI, Smart Passive Income. And he's got a podcast called Smart Passive Income, and he wrote this book called Superfans. And he talks about how you don't start to build a list. You start by genuine content. You want to help others. You share. You're fascinated by the journey of learning, and people start to follow you, and they follow you, and they follow you, and eventually they'll kind of follow you virtually anywhere because they believe in you so much. And he's a very humble, genuine person.
I remember from that blog, and I'm in my intro, like I mentioned, I read every blog post in that time period of probably 2003 to about 2007, I remember there was a lot of good content on Moz, but specifically from Rand, that I just knew there'll be ideas in there.
Right.
And I think back then there's a really strong community. I wasn't heavily involved myself, but I know just on the blog, most blogs get a few comments and most of them are not really well thought out and it's mostly spam. Moz, it was like the comments sometimes were as good as the actual article. It was like really well thought out. And I remember you gamified, I think, who are the top people in terms of commenting, and it kind of encouraged people again to want to engage. And it felt like a community almost before people were talking about communities back then. But I think you'd really nailed that side of things. Of it's not just about a one-way conversation, it's how do you engage with people. And I think maybe your transparent approach of being open to criticism. I don't know everything, but here's my thoughts about this topic. Let's discuss. Probably helped in that, okay, well, people are open to me saying, I disagree with you in a constructive way, or this is what I think, this is what I've tested, and here's where I am. And I think that's where the community comes from. It's not just a one-way, Rand says this means it must be right. It's Rand thinks this, he's experimented with something. Let's talk about everyone else's experience. Is that
so
bad?
Rand, do you think it was of its time? Do you think that model of discovery has gone because everyone's now blaring about community and we all need to be in communities? And I'm like, really? Okay. Or is it just we're not doing it right?
So I mentioned to you guys that MOZ and SparkToro had one big differentiator in terms of the discovery.
Yes.
And that big differentiator is at MOZ, I wrote blog posts. We can talk a little more about the 03 to 07 years, but Kevin, long story short, you are one of the few fans of that era. I don't know if you've gone back and read anything from that time period, but like they're terrible. I mean, the blog posts are just awful. The comments are actually quite good. That's where I think a lot of the value was. But it was not, I don't think it was until maybe 07, 08 that the blog posts started getting good. And then you could really feel like the strong years were 09 to 2016. That was like that time period. The content was very high quality relative to everything else out there. And, basically ranked for anything in Google, right? Almost anything you searched for during that time frame, Moz was top 1, 2, 3. But SparkToro does no SEO. We don't rank for, to my knowledge, according to Google Search Console, there is no keyword that sends us more than 20 or 30 visits a month in traffic, apart from the word SparkToro and variants of our brand name. Our discovery process is completely unlike Moz's. It is, social media and people recommending it to each other and email subscribers and distribution across sort of content platforms like, people use it in their answers on Quora, or people link to it on their Medium blog posts, or from their other posts, people have me on their show, podcasts, YouTube channels, events. Those are the ways that SparkToro gets traffic. And why is this so different from Moz? Well, in the case of Moz, SEO was an established field with tons of people trying to learn, right? So folks like yourself, Kevin, right?
Yeah.
Gosh, we're all trying to learn SEO. So I look up, Ahrefs Lang implementation for e-commerce. Oh, and look, there's a Moz article about that. Great. When people want what SparkToro offers, they usually don't know that they want it.
Yep.
Like the product that we sell, the data and information around audience research is not something that marketers have been trained to or thought about collecting. That doesn't mean it's not valuable. It just means people don't have that problem. They don't have a word association with that problem.
Yep.
Folks might say to themselves, gosh, I really wish I knew which podcasts my audience listened to so that I could do better ad targeting and sponsor the right podcast. That'd probably be a big win for us. I don't even know a way to figure it out, and I'm not going to Google it. Maybe I'll look for top podcasts in accounting. But that's not great, right? What Google shows me there is not the top podcasts that accountants listen to.
Correct.
It's the it's the podcasts that have the most links that happen to use the word accounting in their title, right? It's not going to help you out.
And Rand, I could rant for a long time about discovery issues and data in podcasting. It's a disaster.
Oh, I'm sure. No, it's terrible, right? I mean, this is one of the reasons, right, that we fundamentally built SparkToro, is that one form of audience research is keyword research. I want to know which search terms and phrases my audience searches for so that I can write content and rank in Google or Bing, right, to try and get in front of them. But this is not the only way in which audience research is useful. And it sort of struck Casey and I in 2018 when we started this company that there's no reasonable way to do every other kind of audience research. You want to know what keywords people search for? Great. There's a bunch of tools that'll tell you. What if I want to know what social accounts they follow, or what content they listen to, subscribe to, or what hashtags they use? What if I want to know their demographics, gender, age, geographic distribution? I want to know their education. I want to know what kind of degrees they have. I want to know their skills and interests. There's really two ways to do this. Like the best way, not the best way. The highest quality way to get information, but it is super illegal and unethical, is you, hopefully neither of you have tried this, but I mean, theoretically it's possible. You get the home addresses of all your customers, right? Then you go learn lock picking. You break into their house, right. You steal their phone, you get their unlock code, and then you look at everything that they read and watch and subscribe to, right? You go to their YouTube, you go to their email, you look at all the, okay, they're subscribed to these newsletters, and they've got, and then you download that into a giant database. And it's funny because you don't actually need any of the personally identifiable information. You just need to know, in aggregate, 62% of my customers subscribe to that email, and 12% go to this conference, and 11% subscribe to this YouTube channel, and 17% listen to this podcast, 42% are following that Twitter account. The next best way is what we saw some pretty smart agencies doing. And it's possible that you have done this work, which is we saw in 2018 some agencies who basically would charge their clients $150,000 to take an email list of people who'd bought, right, of their customers or subscribers, send it through Clearbit or Full Contact, get all their social profiles, right, mapped up, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, whatever, then build a crawler to go crawl all of those sites and download all of the YouTube channels that any public profile in their customer database subscribe to, and show me everything that their Twitter followers follow, and show me all the posts that they sent on LinkedIn, and show me everyone that they follow, all their connections on LinkedIn. Right? That process, incredibly expensive, often a 6 to 9 month process or longer. But we thought, oh my God, wait a minute. That's worth 6 figures to the client?
Yeah.
Like they're willing to pay $150,000 for a one-time list of here's what my audience follows, reads, listens to, subscribes to, watches. We could build that for the whole internet and charge people $50 a month. And instead of 9 months, you could do it in 3 seconds. And that's essentially what SparkToro is. You can, you go to SparkToro and you say, my audience has this behavior. They follow Kevin Gibbons on Twitter. Tell me all the people who follow Kevin Gibbons that are in SparkToro's index. I want to know what YouTube channels are most popular with them. I want to see what podcasts they subscribe to. I want to see what they read, blah, 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 blah. And that data is available for virtually any online audience. It is, I think the hardest part of SparkToro is just explaining to people how it works and what to do with it.
So can I go down a little bit of a rabbit warren there, Rand? So for example, I appeared on a podcast called Sales Gravy by a guy called Jeb Blount, who you may or may not have heard of, but it's an example, it's an illustration. What I want to know is, well, if people listen to Jeb, then who else do they listen to?
Yes.
Because I can then pitch them, I was on Jeb's podcast, could I be on yours as a guest?
Yep.
But I can't find out.
Yes, you can. In fact, we could do it right now. This is not hard.
Oh my word. Okay.
Jeb Blount is Blount.
So Jeb Blount, Blount.
Perfect. Okay.
And his podcast is called Sales Gravy.
Sales Gravy. Got it. All right. So let's see here.
Never work with children, technology, or animals.
You follows the social account of Sales Gravy.
Yep.
All right. Let's see what we got here. So, okay, we have 52,000 people in our index who have followed Sales Gravy, and then you can see a whole bunch of data and information about their online behaviors, right? So they tend to be a lot like yourself, authors, consultants, speakers, management development. It's a little male skewed. Looks like a lot of people in sales and ops.
Yep.
And then you can see social accounts that they follow most and engage with. And there you go. Podcasts they listen to. So,
oh my God, really?
Yeah. So here you go. Life is a Marathon has a very high overlap. Sales Playbook, Growth Show, Sell or Die, Guy Kawasaki.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yep. So, and this is a long list, right? There's a lot of podcasts that have some overlap. Yeah, Joe Pulizzi, right? 9% overlap with that audience. I think this is a Japanese one.
So Rand, how do you do that?
How do you do that? Well, okay.
So first of all, I need to subscribe. So I need to go back in and pay for my subscription rather than the free one.
No, you don't. you don't need to. Well, and this is not right. I'm not trying to be salesy here. Hopefully you can.
But that's the beauty, Rand. You're not being salesy. That's the beauty of it.
The fundamental data is all public on the web. Like Mike, for example, you could go to Jeb's LinkedIn and his Twitter account, and you could see everyone who follows him. And you could just manually go to, take a sample size of 1,000 profiles and then look at everything else that they engage with. What are all the URLs that they've shared on LinkedIn? What are all the URLs they've shared on Twitter?
So you kind of follow the thread. Public. You follow the chain.
Right. Like you could do this research manually. It is a pain in the tuchus.
Yeah.
But I don't know how much Yiddish makes it over your way. But you can absolutely do this. And the problem is just that even though Google can crawl this, you could build a crawler to do it. For some weird reason, which makes no sense to me, for the last 20 years, nobody's built this thing in this particular way. Like lots of data sources, lots of social media monitoring tools obviously crawl all of this stuff and will show you like, hey, here's all the people who, have some particular behavior, like they talked about your brand name and here's the sentiment around that. There's tons of, products you could subscribe to that give you that information, or BuzzSumo, right? That tells you whenever a particular URL is mentioned, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But what we wanted was exactly what these, high-priced consultants were offering, which is tell me what percent of this audience has this behavior.
Yeah.
And so, that's the way SparkToro is built.
Wow.
But going back to the discovery thing, you asked. I think we got.
That's what I'm fascinated by. How do people find out? Yeah. How do people find out and subscribe about you?
Well, this is the infuriating part, because nobody searches for how do I figure out which podcasts are listened to by. No. You have the question, right? You know that you would do valuable marketing things with that data if you only had it. So what's going on? Like, why don't people type that into Google? And my explanation is we don't have a practice or a keyword phrase that people use that marketers are familiar with to describe the process of audience research, unlike SEO, right? So SEO, public relations, content marketing, social media marketing, influencer marketing, PPC, display advertising, all of these fields have hundreds of thousands of search terms behind them that indicate that a person is interested. I just don't know of a phrase that anyone searches for in Google. Even audience research itself gets less than 50 searches a month globally. People don't look for it.
Wow.
So our job, and this is, I think, part of the big difference between MOZ and SparkToro. Our job is essentially to not only market SparkToro, the product, we have to market the problem that we solve. And that is the discovery, the sort of big gating piece of our discovery challenge is, instead of, hey, Rand, write a blog post about X. It's 2012, lots of whatever search marketers are looking for Google Panda update tips or what have you. In the world of audience research, it's, okay, we have to figure out who the audience is and then be present in the places they already pay attention. That's the only way that we're going to get in front of our audience, because they don't proactively go out and look for what we offer.
That makes sense, because if you think back, kind of even 5 years ago, let alone 10, it's probably for you in the MOZ days, it would be speak at the big search conferences or digital conferences, write blog posts, Twitter, maybe LinkedIn, those type of audiences. And I guess now it's probably being a podcast guest and getting in front of the right people, but in a different, everything changes over time, right? In terms of how they consume content. So you have to evolve with that. And I don't think it means you should never speak at events, you should never write blog posts, you shouldn't use Twitter. But I mean, there's probably other reasons not to use Twitter, but still, I think, I think it's just understanding and following where that audience is absolutely crucial.
Because I have this problem, Rand. So this is why I love the podcast with Kevin, because we have guests on and it's like, oh, now I'm interested. So for example, my audience is salespeople. So who needs to know about negotiation? Well, salespeople. Well, I talk about negotiation to salespeople. The problem is a salesperson never thinks, oh, I need someone to help me work out what the process is to negotiate. They never do that. They never, ever do that. So I have to show up where they are so that I either irritate them, prompt them, poke them into the, oh yeah, I've had that problem because my conversion rates are really poor. Well, maybe it's because you're not strict in the negotiation. So I've got to be where they are and show up where they are. What I find really hard is working out, where are they? Where are the salespeople? How do I get in front of them? Because writing a blog, to me, writing blogs now, for me personally as a creator and a solo kind of preneur expert, it's a necessary. I have to have it because people will read it, but it's never gonna grow my client base. It's never gonna happen because I'm too small. I'm relatively undiscoverable. I rank, for example, I rank on page 1 for about 2 or 3 terms, but the volume of searches is 50 searches a month.
Yeah.
So I kind of have to do it, but I know that's not the route to success. But I can't find the route.
I think for many, many folks in worlds like yours and worlds like ours, there is a huge part of our traffic and brand awareness and potential comes from dark traffic and from personal referrals.
Yeah.
Right. So that means we're never going to be able to attribute the source. We won't be able to see where it came from. Right. Maybe it came from a WhatsApp message, but of course, WhatsApp does not tell you, oh, this person came from here. Maybe it came from someone sending a LinkedIn email to someone else. That looks like direct or type in traffic. Again, never going to be able to see it. It comes from social media, which a good 50-60% of is dark traffic now, because social media referrers don't want to tell you, other than maybe Twitter and LinkedIn are pretty decent about it. Almost everyone else, Instagram's right, terrible. If there's a link in bio, you will not see that referral string most of the time. Facebook has been doing the same thing. The TikTok link in bio passes no referrer string. So all these platforms are trying to, first off, they don't want you to click out. Right? Yep. They want you to stay on them.
That's right.
And second off, even if you do get traffic from them, they don't particularly want to tell you about it. They'd much rather you pay them, and then they'll show you the data.
Exactly.
So, look, I think it really goes back to the advice that I'd have for any marketer, which is there is no one way to solve this problem. If you are listening to some marketing guru and they tell you, oh, everybody should be doing X and here's how to do X and this is how you're going to win at marketing, they're wrong.
Correct.
They're absolutely wrong. They might be right for your business once.
Yeah.
And there's probably a small, passionate group of people for whom their techniques have worked. And so they become raving fans and they're like, my God, this person's incredible. Look at how it's transformed my business. And it won't work for you at all.
Yep.
And
that's exactly what I've found. So I've worked out after 3 years of spending money and trying and talking to Kevin a lot, who's my kind of guru in this area, is there is no silver bullet.
there's no
It doesn't
silver bullet.
exist. It doesn't exist. So, but what you start to find is, so for example, for me, appearing as a guest on other people's podcasts is a great way of being discovered because I sit on their audience.
Well, and it's an endorsement, right?
Yeah.
Kevin, when you
Social
say,
proof.
yeah, when you say, Kevin, like, hey, Rand, come on my show. I'd really like to share what you're up to with SparkToro with our audience. And I want to talk about MOZ and I want to hear your stories around, SEO and all that kind of stuff. You are implicitly and explicitly saying, I like this person. I trust this person. I think they are authentic. I think you should care about what they have to say. So anyone who's already a fan of your show hears what people that you invite on have to say. And there's a level of trust that is far greater than even you rank number 1 on Google.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Google, we all know Google recommends a lot of crap in the number 1 position, right? Like, there's good stuff too, right? And it's useful.
Yeah,
but
I see this as being one of the age-old questions I've been banging my head against the wall for years was how do you scale word of mouth? Because like you say, as a agency or consultancy, quite often it's, and there's a client that we've worked with in the past that will come back to us. How do you scale that? Because we don't know where the next one comes from. And it's kind of, I've never been in the same way as what you're saying, the salesy style person. The idea of going to a networking event and giving out 20 business cards, to me, it's like, that's not what I want to do. But I will give a presentation, I will write a blog post, and that probably gets you in front of way more than 20 people, and it's the right audience. But quite often it is, like you say, with a dark web, you don't know in terms of kind of who are those people? When are they going to make an inquiry? You don't know. But if you keep, I quite like the analogy, if you keep planting seeds, you keep doing something where it's kind of you're doing the right thing in front of the right people, eventually that will scale word of mouth, but in a way that you can't always track where the next one's going to come from. But it's a bit of a numbers game still, but if you're a guest on X amount of podcasts, or if you spend 5 hours a week on social media pushing out content that engages with your audience, that type of thing, that it will come back. So
I mean, I'm going to argue with you a tiny bit there, Kevin. I think there's a lot of people who do those things. They put in the time, they are on people's podcasts, they are on YouTube channels, they're on social media, they produce blog posts, they have an email newsletter, all those things, but they don't have a clear, memorable association between them and one particular problem that they solve for one particular audience.
Yeah.
And when you miss out on that, positioning, you destroy yourself. You become too broad and bland, and you're talking about everything. I think the most successful people who do this say, I am X for Y.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's right.
I am the world's greatest guru when it comes to e-commerce firms who want to do storytelling with their brand marketing. And if you're an e-commerce firm, you want to do storytelling focused brand, there's no one but me. I am the person in that field. And if you can identify a field that is underserved and a market segment that's underserved that is interested in that thing, and that's what you go broadcast about, you can do 1/10, 1/100th of the content of the appearances and still be memorable for it to exactly the right audience.
I think that's right. Yeah,
definitely.
It's just, there's so many people who are throwing the spaghetti against the wall, but they're not targeted. They haven't focused their own value proposition. They don't say what they are and who they are and what they do it and who they do it for. And so you lose out on this.
3 years,
Rand.
It took me 3 years to focus on the proposition, which is the niche within a niche. I help salespeople negotiate better deals, especially when they meet procurement people, because I'm an ex-buyer.
You are X for Y. I've never heard of or met someone who does what you do, Mike.
Yeah.
Right? I think this is actually probably a challenge that Kevin and I have is, when I was running MOZ, there were a lot of other SEO software companies, right? A lot of other founders of SEO software companies who could speak at conferences and events, right? And so how did I differentiate myself? And Kevin, I suspect you have this challenge as well, where you're like, okay, we're an agency. Which agency are we and who are we for? It sounds like you've got it dialed in with we serve an extremely small number of clients, but we do an extraordinary job for that small number. And so we basically use that. Our strength is kind of the personalized service, the quality of service that you get.
Exactly. We've just niched to e-commerce, but it's that similar sort of thing of what you're saying about.
It's even more niche, Kevin, isn't it? It's niche to e-commerce and organic growth.
Yeah,
we've talked before, Rand, about doing paid.
What do you do? Who do you do it for?
Like, no, we just do organic and we just do it in e-commerce. That's what we do.
Yeah,
Zoom's audio cannot capture how exciting this conversation is.
Exactly. So one thing, just to move it on a bit, is around, I mean, I read your book when it came out, and I think there's obviously a lot of learnings there around your story from an entrepreneurial perspective. And I think just focusing on not necessarily kind of going into what you saw as being kind of what went wrong as such, but more kind of what did you learn from that? What have you taken into SparkToro? Because I think there's a lot there, certainly from a young entrepreneur, and I've been there myself and surrounded myself with other entrepreneurs. And I feel like a lot of people can get trapped into almost like the exit journey of you do this and then you get a big number at the end of it. And they don't really always think about the blood, sweat and tears that go in between. And actually, do you want to go through all of that? And what's the guarantee that you will get there and that side of things? And will you enjoy your life while you're doing it? I think that's like an important question. And I think just understanding kind of, I think sometimes you have to go through things, make mistakes in order to figure out what's right for you. But it strikes me what you've done with SparkToro in terms of growth is impressive. It's ambitious, but you've done it in a way that isn't kind of rocket fueled with investment. It's done in a more lean, maybe bootstrapped, I don't know if that's the right term that you would use to describe it, but certainly a leaner model that feels more enjoyable for you. And I guess feels maybe more like the right thing to do for maybe your customers and your team. So yeah, it'd be interesting to hear kind of how you see that, certainly from the investment side, but also any other learnings that you've taken from your MOZ days and or any experience really, and how you're doing things differently with SparkToro.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we could do hours and hours on this topic.
Sure.
But I think the two...
We've got 15 minutes overall, by the way, for the podcast, because then I have to go and make dinner for the family.
Oh, that is... You are a good man, Mike Lander.
I try.
Bravo. I am a huge proponent of, I don't know if you're in a traditional marriage or anything, but huge proponent of men doing much more of the housework.
Yeah.
I think that is a huge societal problem that we've got to work on. But all right, back to
it is
back to this.
No, that's another conversation, definitely altogether. But yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Modern feminism for agency owners. So probably a small X for Y, but we could find our groove. So Kevin, yes, I think the two big learnings that I suspect are most salient for folks who might be listening to this are, one, we take an extremely unusual approach to work in general, especially the way that we think about doing hard work, which is that we generally speaking try to engineer our business such that it requires very little hard work. So this is essentially, a lot of people talk about, I'm gonna try and work smart instead of hard.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have given yourself in your business difficult problems that need solving over and over again, that require a lot of high effort input, that require very talented people to do them, and many of them, you've engineered a scenario where hard work is inevitable. It's required just for the business to maintain.
Yep.
We did the opposite with SparkToro. Casey and I wanted to build a company whose software was ludicrously simple and straightforward. Getting the data, like we talked about, is difficult, right? Like you got to build crawlers, but once you have the crawling system set up and once they're sort of working on a regular basis, they don't need a lot of maintenance, right? If you build good software, you engineer it well, you build good tests in, you have redundancy, you have fallbacks, you can, generally speaking, do pretty darn well. Mm-hmm. You can build it once, it's difficult, and then it just keeps working.
Exactly.
Right? That's the model that we tried to go with. We also wanted to build software that's ludicrously straightforward. So you saw me using the software for 90 seconds there or whatever. You do a search, you get a list of results, you can click export, you can add them to a list, but there's nothing fancy in there. There's not even any algorithms or machine learning or artificial intelligence, anything like that. Nothing. None of the fancy bells or whistles. It's just division, right? What percent of this group of people had this behavior or this demographic? A child can understand it, right? I've shown SparkToro to some of our investors, 12-year-old kids who are like, oh yeah, I get it. Okay, yeah. People who play Dungeons and Dragons also like Lego.
Yeah,
cool.
That's a great test.
Very, very simple. This is, I think, by the way, I was very chuffed to see that Lego did a Dungeons and Dragons crossover product recently. And when I looked in SparkToro at the audience overlap between the two, you can do a comparison, and the Venn diagram overlap is really there. So we have this thing called chill work. You can Google it. I think we now rank on page 1 for chill work, even though nobody searches for it, because, I don't know, whatever. Late stage capitalism has convinced everyone that we're supposed to have hustle and grit and hard work. And no, man, I ain't about that. This is what we aim for. We try and make it so that the 3 of us who work at SparkToro, there's only 3 people on the team, myself, Amanda, and Casey. And we aim for 30 hours a week or less. That is our goal. So I think that's even less than French working hours.
Yeah, exactly.
which I find admirable. And guess what? Here's the weirdest part. The French are actually a good model for this, because when you look at, I think the average is 32 or 34 hours a week in France. And yet their GDP per capita per hours worked is the highest on the planet.
Wow.
So something's going on there, right? I believe that we have been kind of brainwashed into this idea that you have to work long hours and do difficult things, as opposed to intelligently crafting your work so that your labor, your hard labor, is not very needed, right? I'm not saying we don't, work hard or make intelligent decisions, or, we don't put in effort when effort's required. We do, but almost rarely do we ever have a 50-hour work. And we try to make 40-hour work weeks unusual, and we try to make 20-hour work weeks possible and common. That is our chill work approach, and it's working. It really fundamentally works. Casey can take care of his kids, and he does all the laundry. He's the stay-at-home dad. His wife works out of the house. He has 2 young girls. Amanda can do on and off, switching with her husband. They both work from home, and they've got a kid. I run a second company. I don't think many people know this. I run another company in addition to SparkToro that is making a video game with a studio down in Los Angeles.
Cool.
And I travel a lot, and I have a very rich life of cooking and friends and romance with my wife and all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
I think this. I don't want to, toot my own horn here. I am not wealthier than many of my friends. I have a lot of friends in the entrepreneurial world who have more money than me, lots more money than me. I don't think many of them have better lives.
Exactly.
I want them to, I want them to have the best life that they possibly can. But I think a lot of them are trapped in this, I got to hustle. I should always be working. Why aren't I doing more, making more, working harder? I need to get my team to work harder. How do I find more motivated people instead
Here's the thing, Rand, on that theme. So I love this. If only we were together in a coffee shop or a bar, then you'd get even more of the essence of it. But so what I've been thinking recently is, in my world, helping salespeople become better negotiators. Anyone can go on brilliant courses. There are amazing courses, like the Harvard course is amazing on negotiation. Truly amazing, amazing. The problem is when you get back to base, you can't contextualize. It's very difficult to put it into your real life scenario because you've got the books and the templates and you've seen amazing people, but how does it apply to my scenario today? So what I do, obviously, is I do a lot of scenario-based training in my little business. But more and more over the last 2 years, I've been thinking, there actually aren't that many scenarios. The context is different, but there are only probably a dozen scenarios that salespeople face where you have a difficult negotiation that you've got to think through in a complex way, this complex problem. So I'm starting to work out, well, you look at ChatGPT and you go, okay, could I build something that's got 12 scenarios that has got some AI that basically codifies my commercial experience of 30 years into a scenario and context for a salesperson that allows them to structure a deal in a sensible way that gets a balanced outcome that is good for them and good for the client? There must be a way. Otherwise, I just keep on every time having to recreate the wheel. But the wheel's got a slightly different color each time. And I'm like, that problem needs to be solved.
So I think I love the way that you have taken exactly what we think about with chill work, which is essentially turning your 30 years of experience into some sort of model that can be applied in an intelligent, meaningful manner through software, through machine learning, through AI. That's a complex, difficult problem, but you are doing it in service of not only a product that's useful to your clients, but that saves you a ton of time and energy. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time, so that your work can be more chill. Yeah, and that is the core of what we're trying to do as well. We're not saying don't solve hard problems. No. We're not saying don't put in your full effort. Right? We're not playing the whatever quiet quitting or insert meme here. None of that stuff. But we are saying technology has come a ludicrously long way. We are intelligent people. We can think about ways to create for ourselves, optimize a life for ourselves that requires less of our hands-on input, and instead let's smart technology do the work for us as much as we possibly can. Automation, recurring systems that don't fail and fall over, lots of scale possibility with very little input required from a human being. Yeah. That's chill. Yeah. But it relies upon understanding the difficult problem, working out how to solve it, and then build it once and it runs forever. But you've got to do the hard thinking first. It requires a fundamental goal that I think most entrepreneurs don't have, which is, how do I work less? How do I have to put in less effort to get out a similarly high quality product or an even better product? And the other thing that's core to this belief is that you do your best work when you are well rested, when you have good exercise, when you are eating well, when you're not drinking too much, when you have good friendships in your life and you're closely connected to people, and you feel loved and supported and emotionally secure. That's when you can do your best work. And when those things are absent, you make mistakes. You make bad decisions. You might not think you do, but man, I mean, I talk about the outcome, Rand. So interestingly, because people listening will be going, yeah, it all sounds great, but I'm sure the outcome's not very good. So just talk about, we don't need to know the numbers or the revenues, but SparkToro, in terms of growth and scale, is it delivering what you want with that chill work? Yeah, so here's another interesting thing. So MOZ, when it was doing $50 million in revenue, and gross margins were about 88%. Wow. Was failing. It was failing because it had promised its investors, right, its venture capital investors, a certain rate of growth and an exit at a particular size. Right. And anything below that was a failure. Yep. And so, spoiler alert, I don't know how many people know that MOZ sold in 2021. The transaction was, I'm not really allowed to talk about it, but I mean, the numbers are public enough, right? The company that bought them had to disclose how much they spent on acquisitions that quarter. That number, the total number that they spent on all acquisitions the quarter that they bought MOZ, was considerably lower than what would have been a success for MOZ's investors.
Okay.
So,
wow.
Sad, frustrating story after 17 years of trying to make that company work, and then obviously I left in 2018, and it went on for another 3 years and then sold. The crazy thing about SparkToro is doing much less revenue than that. There's only the three of us. I just announced our revenues in December. We crossed 1.5 million ARR.
Wow. Brilliant.
And margins are quite excellent, like superb. We're about to pay back our investors their initial investment amount. They're all private investors. We structured this unusual round. You can look up SparkToro funding if you're curious for how we structured the round. But then everybody participates in profit sharing pro rata.
Right.
And I would like to see SparkToro grow more. I think it has more growth to do. It is growing, but if it never grew, if it remained a $1.5 million a year business that was, net margin spitting off what it is, it would be a success for its investors and its founders and Amanda, our only employee.
Yeah.
Because we structured it in a way where we essentially said, hey, we are going to set the bar low enough to where if we have a small, tiny little company that does well for its customers, that is going to be a success.
Exactly.
Financially, it's going to be a success, for us, for founders, for the investors. It's going to spit off cash that's going to make them a similar return to market returns.
Yeah.
Great. Like that. I think that's a powerful thing to do, is to not force yourself to become whatever, $1 billion company or die trying. I think that's a stupid, just foolish endeavor. Yep. I don't understand why 99% of software and tech entrepreneurs try to pursue venture capital
to become a unicorn.
Setting themselves up for failure.
Everyone wants to become a unicorn. Why?
Statistically, they're not going to make it. Yeah. So I believe the number is 95% of venture investments fail to return the minimum capital requirements, which you can imagine that does not go nicely for the founding teams or the employees or the customers of all those products. Goes well for no one. And also, in addition to that 95%, there's another 1,000 people for every one funded company. There's 1,000 people who tried to get venture funding and didn't get it.
Yep.
That world, you are signing yourself up for a lot of pain and failure. Even if you go from nothing to $50 million in revenue, and oh my God, we're spitting off $5 million in cash a year. Oh, this business is a failure. What?
And I don't know what the numbers are, Rand, but I suspect if you looked at the number of founder kind of CEOs of tech companies that founded and started them, and you looked at their valuation, at 100 million, a very small number of those founders would still be in place. A very, very, very small number.
Yeah. That is so. That's also true. And then there have been, stats put out there like, once your company, your venture-backed company, gets to $100 million in revenue or more, or you sell for more than $100 million, what percent on average does the founder own in terms of the shares? And that number is a little under 4%.
Yeah.
So
all that effort, all that work, you've got 4%.
No, and you can do well financially there, but I want everyone to know that it is a rigged game. It is rigged in favor, just like the rest of capitalism. It is rigged in favor of capital, not labor. Right? The capital is going to invest in 1,000 companies.
Yep.
They're going to have 950 failures, and that's fine. Doesn't matter for them because the 50 successes are going to make up for it and more. Right? They're going to get to their rate of return.
They do.
But you as a founder, if you're in those 950 companies, you only have one bet. You're going to have a rough time. And even if you're in those 50 companies, with a few exceptions, you might have a very rough time too.
Yep. Rand, on that note, I can't think of a better way to finish, actually. Did you orchestrate that?
Hey, you have me on your show, you're going to get a good show. That's the guarantee.
I would say an amazing show. Kevin, I mean, you kindly, I mean, wow, your relationship and you kindly invited Rand. Do you want to like kind of wash up the show about what your thoughts are? Well, I've got a couple, but
my notes are quite. I'd share it, but you can't see it. I tried to draw a Venn diagram of chill work, solve real problems, automate, enjoy life. I mean, a combination of those in whatever order. But I think for me, that's great. And I think just that whole message around just a little bit of be careful what you wish for, I think, of just actually thinking about what is it you're getting into, and is that actually what you really want if you're facing the facts, and just I think being intentional about where you want to spend your time is really important.
Kevin, when I write the sequel to Lost and Founder, which I hope to do in the next few years, I think one of the biggest takeaways for me is going to be that I felt an incredible amount of pressure as a young entrepreneur to follow in the footsteps of what I saw as the greats in my field. Yeah. Right? I wanted to be Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, I mean, Brian and Dharmesh from HubSpot. I wanted to be Mark Benioff from Salesforce. I wanted to be Elon Musk. And I look at a lot of these people today, a quarter century or a decade after they've had the massive successes that they've had. And with rare exception, I think I'm happier the way I am.
No, I think that's right.
If you told me, hey, you could trade lives with Elon tomorrow, no way would I take that deal.
Oh,
absolutely.
Hell no. I think that person is deeply, deeply unhappy. I think he's angry and vengeful and just filled with regret that he can't process. I think that his day-to-day life is incredibly rough. I saw it, like he travels with his kid between like midnight and 2 a.m. trying to, it sounds heartbreaking and awful, right? If he wasn't such a bad impact on the world around him, I'd have a lot of empathy for the guy, because I don't think his life is a good one.
No, I get what you mean.
Yeah, and frankly, what are you trying to optimize for?
Yeah.
Honestly, is the total amount of money in your bank account the only thing in the world that matters to you? I don't think that's going to be a good life, friend.
No, I think that's completely right. And I was going to say, on a previous podcast, we were talking about how someone mentioned kind of Tiger Woods being an idol. And my point, and I'm taking this from someone else, is you can't take someone's success on the golf course and just take that part of their life. You have to take everything that goes with it. And everyone would want to be Tiger Woods on the golf course, of course, but off of the golf course, not at all. And I think Bill Gates, you might argue, like potential Elon, I think again, it's like that. It is that be careful of what you wish for, because there's another side to it that you might not want. And is that what you want for your own life? So I think, again, just being intentional with the whole package, I think, is really important.
Rand, it's been fantastic. The journey of an entrepreneur, not just once. Most entrepreneurs, they do something, they have one success, however it's defined, and that's their story forever. Not you. No.
Well, I mean,
you've also redefined success
right?
for yourself.
This is such the weird part, Mike. I think if you look in the did this person win the race that they set out to win? SparkToro is the success and MOZ was the failure. Right? I mean, technically, it's very, very strange. Yeah. And hopefully this video game is going to do well too. So
exactly.
In a couple of years, you'll have to have me back on, and we'll
definitely
talk about that.
And it's about, I think, one of my big takeaways from this has been, and it's one I completely and utterly buy into and have done for a number of years now, is success is how you define it. Once you're happy with what success looks like for you, then once you've got along that journey and you're quite a long way along it and it's working, that's okay. just stay in the same direction. You're doing what you love and what you want to do. That's great. Don't judge yourself in terms of success by others. Do not have I say this to our son. Success isn't relative. It's to do with you, Leo. It's to do with your own idea of what success looks like.
Oh, Mike, that is beautiful. God, I wish my dad had been on that wavelength.
Rand, it's been amazing. Thank you ever so much. Really enjoyed that. Hopefully one day we'll actually meet in person.
Thanks for listening to our podcast. We hope you learned something new and useful about entrepreneurship. We'd love it if you could rate or review us on the app you use to listen to this on. Thanks.